In this episode, we're going to be addressing some additional criticisms that are commonly expressed towards Maoism, namely that Maoism is sectarian, dogmatic, and sponsors cults of personality. So, starting with the issue of sectarianism. Sectarianism is an issue throughout the entire left. It's not merely the domain of Maoism. It's the tendency to isolate and alienate oneself and the party from other like-minded groups within the class struggle. This is done not on principle, but on a need to establish an overly particularist variant in order to differentiate oneself and to engage in unnecessary splits and factionalist activity in an unprincipled and needless manner. In order to understand this distinction, we must understand the difference between principled differentiation and unprincipled differentiation. A principled differentiation involves an unresolved line struggle within an organization that becomes incapable of supporting a revolutionary line. This can be due to rigid and dogmatic leadership, enshrined revisionism, or a failure to tolerate constructive criticism and self-criticism. Outside of a party structure and within the overall class struggle, it becomes necessary for a Maoist party to undergo principled differentiation in order to draw a distinction between a genuine and revolutionary working class movement from liberal or revisionist elements within the class struggle. Drawing lines of demarcation in order to separate reformism and revisionism from revolution. This is absolutely necessary to establish oneself as the vanguard party of the working class. However, care should be taken to avoid unprincipled differentiation, which is not concerned with maintaining and upholding revolutionary principles, but is occupied with drawing imaginary lines of demarcation, or descending into hyper-particularist variations for no good reason. Sectarianism would divide an otherwise cohesive movement. Maoists are often accused of sectarianism for no other reason than because we insist on line struggle and uphold revolutionary principles. Maoists are frequently accused by revisionists of being splitters, wreckers, and factionalists for simply holding the party accountable and fighting against revisionist elements within a party, or by attempting to rectify errors within the party through internal systems of party democracy. In this manner, they may also accuse us of breaking with democratic centralism. Like we discussed in the previous episode about line struggle within the party, the existence of line struggle is to be expected. Merely insisting that line struggle occur is not factionalism, but a vital part of inter-party democracy. A commandist ultra-centralism may occur, where the party leadership prevents principled line struggle from occurring in the name of unity within the party. But this unity, divorced from democracy, is not the disciplined unity of democratic centralism, and contrary to ensuring true unity within the party, it actually sows the seeds of factionalism. But unprincipled differentiation may also occur in the dissatisfied and the unrepresented sectors of the party. Commandism breeds cliques, some of which reinforces the leadership, while others become rival factions. Likewise, the presence of ultra-democracy will result in a bogging down of party action and dissolution of party unity into a myriad of struggling tendencies. The democratic process within the party listens to the viewpoints of all who would speak, and even if the ideas of those speaking are incorrect ideas, they're still entitled to speak, provided they also respect the democratic centralist model. Party democracy is where criticism, self-criticism, line struggle, and rectification occurs. It's a necessary part of the vanguard, and to fail to engage in the democratic process will create division. However, centralism is also necessary, in that the party must emerge out of the democratic process with unity and discipline, with a unity of action. Ultra-democracy breeds factionalism as well. In the absence of centralism, a myriad of feuding tendencies are created and fester within the party. Factionalism is any attempt to steer the direction of the party outside of the democratic centralist model. It may occur in an ultra-centralist means, or ultra-democratic means, or through clandestine means, all of which serve to navigate around the democratic centralist process and results in the emergence of sectarian tendencies. There's a dialectic struggle between factionalism and unity, with the contradiction between the two being resolved through the correct application of democratic centralism. Ultra-centralism, ultra-democracy, clandestine factionalism, and the sectarianism it creates leaves the revolutionaries no alternative but to engage in a principled split. Principled differentiation is something that has occurred throughout the history of communism. Marx and Engels struggled against the utopian socialists. Lenin struggled against the Second International, and then the Mensheviks. Stalin struggled against the right opportunist line of Bukharin, and then later Trotsky. And Mao struggled with the Khrushchevite revisionists and the bourgeois headquarters within the Communist Party of China. In each instance, these struggles serve to refine and demarcate the revolutionary road from the capitalist or revisionist road. In some of these cases, the revisionist will uphold these struggles, but only as a commitment to orthodoxy and not out of an understanding of their necessity. However, the revisionist will often pick and choose, often repudiating principled line struggles in an ironically sectarian manner. Many universally criticize Maoism as a hyper-sectarian tendency rife with splits and factionalist activity, dogmatic tests of purity, and the emergence of personality cults. However, there is a fundamental error to imply that sectarianism is something inherent to Maoism. This marks ignorance of the revolutionary experience throughout history. We can look to contemporary Maoist movements, such as the Communist Party of the Philippines, as a prime example of a Maoist party cooperating with a broader range of organizations with the National Democratic Front, NDF, and National Democratic Mass Organizations, also known as MDMOs. We can also see how sectarianism is rife within all tendencies, whether they be Marxist, Marxist-Leninist, Trotskyists, or Maoists. Now we should speak a little bit about dogmatism. Dogmatism is a rigid and narrow interpretation of theory, and the belief that scholarly knowledge is superior to experiential knowledge. We must oppose book worship, like Chairman Mao said, and ground our theory and practice in material reality. We must ensure our practices are best suited for the current material situation rather than robotically repeating the exact methods of past movements without considering the current context. Treating the heads of Marxism as infallible gods, whose words are absolute doctrine, is ironically against the principles of scientific socialism. Maoism seeks to refine and hone its theoretical framework in the concrete reality of the class struggle. It does not interpret reality through a metaphysical lens, where past methods become an absolute dogma which must be universally applicable regardless of circumstance. Rather, the conceived universality of certain theoretical principles must constantly test itself by engaging in practice and class struggle. A dogmatic and metaphysical interpretation of theory can lead to the adoption of ultra-leftism, ultra-centralism, and ultra-democracy. Dogmatism seeks to maintain purity in the movement, failing to acknowledge periods of consolidation and refusing any form of collaboration with those deemed unworthy. It is quick to repudiate anyone outside of their narrow and rigid interpretation of theory and rejects principled criticism. Dogmatism and sectarianism often go hand in hand, often confining themselves into a niche representing their hyper-sectarian and overly particularist tendency at the expense of a cohesive revolutionary movement. Their tendency remains pure at the expense of an outright refusal to immerse themselves in the class struggle and all the messiness of real-life organizing. This dogmatism leads to a dismissal or rejection of a revolutionary line. This trend is known as dogmato-revisionism, which we covered in a previous chapter. Through study, we can determine that dogmatism is a problem among many different tendencies and does not specifically apply to Maoism alone. It occurs throughout all left tendencies. Maoism, as the highest stage of revolutionary science, insists on refining its practice through acquiring experiential knowledge and through criticism. Maoism tests its models through the laboratory of the class struggle and amends itself, if necessary, in light of new experience. Dogmatism is opposed to scientific process and treats revolutionary theory like a religious doctrine, with an enshrined orthodoxy which rejects all heterodox tendencies as heretical. Now we should talk about the concept of cults of personality. A common charge against Maoism is that it creates a cult of personality around its leaders. While this is arguably true in certain instances, once again, this common charge is blanketly applied to the entirety of the Maoist movement while ignoring how this is a problem throughout the left. There are differences between acknowledging that, in a revolutionary movement, there emerges certain individuals who become great leaders, and differentiating this trend from the creation of a cult of personality. Cults of personality see the great leader as tantamount to the revolution itself, rather than a product of the revolution. The conditions of class struggle produce this leader. To create an organizational structure which revolves around the words of a great leader, rather than an organization that revolves around the class struggle and how to best achieve revolution, becomes limited and rigid. It collapses or succeeds depending on whether or not the individual line of a single person is the correct or incorrect line. If the leader should become uncriticized and unquestioned, this would enshrine commandism into the party and will ultimately lead to the abandonment of the mass line. The movement of the working class as a collective will be limited to the movement of a great leader as an individual. The party must be greater than the leader it produces, and the leader must be a representative of the collective of the party, which in turn is a representation of the collective of the revolutionary masses. This is why there must be an insistence on criticism and self-criticism, and of line struggle within the party. The individual must subordinate to the collective, and cannot hold the party captive to commandist whims and self-glorification. The revolutionary movement must be robust, and cannot allow itself to fall if the leader it produces is defeated or sells out. A true great leader within the movement realizes their own limitations in this matter, and humbly subordinates themselves to the collective of the party, and does not shy away from criticism and self-criticism. Great leaders may be created artificially and proclaimed as flawless and a theoretical genius, surrounded by sycophants, or a great leader may emerge organically through the crucible of class struggle, held accountable by the party and the working class it represents. All too often, leaders of communist parties surround themselves with sycophants who treat their words like the infallible word of God, and mindlessly repeat the words of the leader like a mantra, without reason or logic, and from a position of quasi-religious devotion. In this manner, revisionism, dogmatism, ultra-leftism, ultra-centralism, and even a bourgeois headquarters with petty bourgeois individualism enshrines itself within the leadership of the vanguard, with organizers and officers becoming sycophantic yes-men to the leadership, and the rank and file becoming mindless drones expected to adhere to the will of the cult of personality. To criticize the leader is to criticize the party itself, and to insist on rectification or line struggles is to become a factionalist for daring to question the dogma of the ruling clique. The emergence of cults of personality often arise from a myriad of errors which become unchallenged within a party, often because those who attempt to rectify these errors are purged from the ranks and accused of factionalism, even if they remain committed to democratic centralism while the leading clique does not. However, we have to be cognizant of how accusations of cults of personality are rife within revisionist sectors, and this accusation, similar to accusations of ultra-leftism, adventurism, sectarianism, dogmatism, and others, becomes weaponized and used as a tool to suppress revolution. Care must be taken by Maoists to understand what a cult of personality is and what it actually looks like in practice, and to differentiate the reality of personality cults from accusations of personality cults, as this accusation is all too common with revisionists. A good historical example was the extensive use of this accusation by Nikita Khrushchev to denounce Joseph Stalin. So how should Maoists counter sectarianism, dogmatism, and cults of personality? Maoists should use the apparatus of democratic centralism to advance a line struggle, advance criticism and rectification campaigns within the party, avoiding factionalism and wrecking behavior, and only splitting away once these attempts have been exhausted. Sometimes within the movement, Principled splits are unavoidable and necessary to maintain the revolutionary line, but we must also understand that these splits need to be with the intention of preserving and maintaining this line rather than enshrining a dogmatic fidelity to theory and thereby rejecting scientific socialism. And these splits should not be for the purpose of preserving the uncriticized ego of some figurehead within the movement. Cults of personality are a danger in that they create dogmatism and avoid criticism. Such formations rapidly descend into commandism, abandoning democratic aspects of the party and creating resentment within its ranks. This also leads to the alienation of the party from the masses, which ultimately makes revolutionary action impossible. The best way to preserve and maintain the revolutionary trajectory is to emphasize line struggle in the party, to emphasize criticism and self-criticism, and to uphold the doctrine of democratic centralism while maintaining an objective commitment to scientific socialism while upholding the mass line. So that about does it for this episode. Just to review, we talked about the issues of sectarianism and how there are principled splits and unprincipled splits. We also talked about the error of dogmatism and how this is an affront to scientific socialism. We also talked about the emergence of cults of personality and differentiating that from revisionist charges of cults of personality, and talking about the danger it poses to democratic centralism and criticism within the party. So be sure to join us next time. We have a short episode talking about the phenomena of Fed jacketing in episode 19. Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments down below. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. Dinky Kang out.